Welcome to councillors, Mr Mohi, our staff, of course, a media contingent, which we don't normally see, and of course you, the public. You're obviously all here to hear the Chairman's report at the end of the day. I have to disappoint you that will be a bit later on, but we are going to start, if you look at our agenda, with once we're through the conflict of interest declarations, we're going to go straight to the item on the Ruataniwha water storage scheme. Just a bit of housekeeping. Good to see you all here. Just in the case of an earthquake, obviously drop and hold under the nearest table if there is one nearby. In the case of an evacuation, out the nearest exit and the grass area on the corner of Vortia and Dalton Street, please. Our toilets are just down the hallway here and to the right. I'd like to remind all councillors and any other speakers to make use of the microphone so people can hear today. And please, everyone, audience included, could you please turn your cell phones off now? Thank you. So we have no interruptions on the way through. Saving power to start the meeting. Hawke's Bay today in charge of the lighting over there, is that right? Okay, I'll take us through the prayer. So if you could all stand, please, for the council prayer. O God, our Creator, bless us as we gather today for this meeting. Guide our minds and hearts so that we will work for the good of our community and help all your people. Teach us to be generous in our outlook, courageous in face of difficulty, and wise in our decisions. We ask this grace through Christ our Lord. Amen. So apologies today. We have a full muster. Thank you. Notices. I have no notice other than the fact that I wish to start the meeting with the Ruataniwha water storage discussion. Thank you. And conflict of interest declarations. Have any declarations, conflict of interest?
Chairman, no, but I would like to make plain that I don't have a conflict of interest because it has been raised. I've also tabled a letter that was sent to us under Plan Change 5, and I just want to say that when I handle conflict of interest, I handle it in an absolutely and utterly and transparent way. That particular case, I conducted a process that was fair and impartial to consider the case. In this, we have had a lot of advice. We've had advice from the Auditor General. We had advice at the time that I was a director, as were you and Councillor Dick. Took advice from the Auditor General that there was no conflict, and that, as you will know, we went through a process that made sure that we had separated ourselves as directors from that company before any consideration of a business case to proceed was formulated by the company. So I'd say quite plainly here and now that I have no conflict in that. I have not in any way, I have no financial interest in it. I have no conflict of duty. And of course I have not at any stage submitted for or against the decision on any matter arising for it. So I am totally free of conflict of interest. I believe that there are two other directors here who are probably in the same situation. There are two other ex-directors who are in the same situation.
So you're confirming you don't have a conflict? Okay. Anyone else? Thank you. Okay, let's go to agenda item 8. Decision on Ruataniwha water storage scheme investment on page 11 of our agendas. Please, and I'll hand that over at this stage to the Chief Executive to kick us off.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and good morning, councillors. This paper here, I plan to go through it really section by section. I'm aware that there'll be a number of questions that you may wish to ask on the way through, and so I've created a PowerPoint presentation that really divides up the various topics, and there'll be advisors, both staff and external advisors, here to answer questions at specific times when it may go through. So I just really wanted to, I guess, make it quite clear, I'm sure the councillors all know, but particularly for the public today, really what the decision is that's being made today. and it's around, will this council, regional council, invest up to $80 million in the Ruataniwha water storage scheme? It's a question of investment. Council has previously made provision for the funding for that investment in its long-term plan. It has carried that through to its 2 subsequent annual plans, and but always under the proviso that a number of criteria have to be met around the investment, including the public consultation that's taken place recently, in which a number of you have been a part of. So this is really the critical question. This is a very complex project. There are a number of different streams of work around it occurring simultaneously, but the critical question today is, how does it stack up as an investment for this council? Just looking at the strategic context, I think it's really important, because this has been going on for really 4 to 5 years. It's important to appreciate really where this has come from originally, and it has come from a response by the council to community concerns around the water quality in the Tukituk River, and it has come about because council has really taken a reasonably high risk approach, I think, in looking at both regulatory and non-regulatory solutions to this. So we have the Resource Management Act, which backs us up, gives us the ability to be able to regulate for certain activities, and that's certainly a tool that we do and are using in this particular catchment. But this council has also, on a number of occasions, and not just in this, looked at, well, what are the unintended consequences if we just regulate, and how can we put our resources into addressing those unintended consequences through perhaps non-regulatory, or dare I say even innovative solutions to particular situations. So this is really around the need to both to acknowledge both the needs of the environment and also the needs of people, and the strategic objectives for this particular project include establishing and managing a key infrastructure resource to improve agricultural production and productivity while enhancing environmental management of the catchment. So it's both, it's and that's always been council's intent all the way along. It's not either or, it's and. Back in late 2012, the council asked its investment company, the Hawke's Bay Regional Investment Company, and I'll refer to it from now on as HBRC, to work through the grunt of this particular process to see whether or not this infrastructure project is a goer. And they have a number of answers to give, or have to give to council, around both the resource management requirements, around construction, around farmer uptake, etc., and to come back with the council with a recommendation whether or not to proceed with this. The HBRC have brought back their business case to council, and there'll be some discussion about that and some more information about that in a slide a bit later on. But the recommendation is to, to invest in the scheme, and we've advised HBRC that any investment decision is subject to the matters that are on that list up there on the slide. A legal advice on RWSS documents, and there's a opportunity to ask questions on that coming up, and we have Stuart Webster here from Sainsbury, Logan and Williams, who will be available to answer specific questions that councillors may have. A peer review of the business case, which has been to council, it's been undertaken by Deloitte. An analysis of alternative investments, resource consents from the Environmental Protection Authority, a public consultation process around council's preferred option, which is to invest, and the satisfying of all conditions precedent. I think it's fair to say then that, as a sort of summing up of the introduction, that this is very much a defining point in this process. And while it is quite clearly a decision on whether or not the dam, you invest in the dam or not, by making this decision today, you send some clear messages out there. I think you're all more than well aware of that. And I think those key messages that I perceive are listed up there. The first one there is to the farmers. You're saying to them, we've got the confidence to invest. You should sign water user agreements and looking at investing yourselves in the scheme. To the institutional investors, you would be saying that the Regional Council itself, which began the whole process, is also financially committed to it. To the Regional Council, you are giving some certainty around the earmarking of the funds that have been made available for the investment. And to the community, you're sending a signal that there's strong and coherent and strong regional leadership around this table. The first point or the first topic that we really want to cover is around the legal review. So one of the key one of the requirements of your decision is to be satisfied with the legal review of all the RWSS documents. There's a concession deed agreement between the Regional Council and the proposed Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership, and that's really to ensure that Council's own objectives are met, particularly around its environmental objectives for the scheme. And it also gives some assurance to Council that it has some control over the delivery of the scheme. The project agreement, which is been designed to be consistent with but separate from the concession deed agreement, is between HBRC and the Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership. And Mr Webster has provided you with 2 legal opinions, included as attachments in your agenda, around the draft concession deed agreement, and will be undertaking a final review of the documents as part of the due diligence process, which will be talked about later. Mr Webster is available now for questions if anyone has any specific questions on his commentary.
Questions? Legal questions. Councillor Belford. Microphone, please.
Good morning, Mr Webster.
Good morning, Councillor.
I'm looking at a couple of the documents that you have provided in the attachments we were given for this meeting, and right in the very beginning, you're first up here with a letter that was dated 8 April, and at that point you note that you had not seen the content of any proposed water user agreement.
That's correct.
And then the next letter we have from you following that one is dated 18 June. And it's in our materials, it's on page 13. And could you look at 3.2 there, where you make further comments which regarding the model water user agreement and a complete reformulation of the provisions around those, which sort of suggests that you still haven't come to terms with the water user agreement and issues we might have to raise about that. Have you seen the water user agreement at this point?
No, I haven't, and I haven't been asked to review that. But I think in my discussions with Bell Gully, the answer is that it was taken out of the concession deed for a specific reason, because it didn't belong there. And I'm yet to have a further discussion with Bell Gully about that particular issue.
So you might not be aware that one of the specific requests that we made of the staff at our last discussion of this project was that we get an opinion from you regarding the water user agreement, and given the concerns about conditions that were rumored to be in the agreement, since we councillors have never seen the water user agreement. So the only place that it's referred to again is in this document you just referred to, on page 268 of our materials. If I could point you back there. Where, for example,
Sorry, what paragraph?
I'm finding it myself here. In page 268 and following is somebody's write-up of the conditionalities that are present in the agreement. And I trust that's not your document. You haven't written that.
That's the first time I've seen it. I haven't written that. No.
So you haven't written that. And it raises for the first time some conditions, for example, with respect to farmer environmental management plans. If those are not adequately prepared to the satisfaction of the company running this project, it would appear that farmers can terminate those contracts or back out of them or whatever. The point of all of these questions is perhaps the most critical assumption behind all of this is that we have firm, unconditional water user contracts to purchase 40 million cubic meters of water. We really want to know as a council how tightly written those contracts are, whether there are escape clauses in them or not that we should be concerned about, and we would be looking to you for that advice. And we sit here today with this as a key, probably most people would agree, is the key underlying question, perhaps other than the Board of Inquiry's final call, as to whether this whole thing holds water or not. And you're unable to advise us on this issue.
I haven't been asked for that advice.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, could I perhaps answer this? There's 2 points that you raised, Councillor. The first is about why Mr. Webster was not asked to review the water user agreement, and his response was that that has been taken out of the concession deed agreement. So the explanation for that, for why that's happened, is that the concession deed agreement has a period of 70 years and can only be changed with the approval of council. It was felt that was not appropriate for water user agreements to be tied into that period of time and or requirements to be changed by council. The second point you raise is about the condition around farm environment management plans. The key part of that particular tool is whether or not under the new planning framework for Plan Change 6, whatever that may end up looking like, whether or not a farm can operate within the nutrient budget that is determined by overseer. So the condition around whether or not that is able to be met will be determined through a technical process of the application of overseer. It will not be left to anyone's opinion, and it will require a yes or no answer in relation to the technical process that will be used to evaluate land use capability.
Since the interpretation of that and what you're saying, what you do are confirming, I guess, what you are confirming is that these agreements, in fact, do have an escape. And I, for one, as a councillor, first of all, it's appalling to me that after months of requesting, councillors have not seen the water contract agreement, which is floating all over the countryside, apparently. We have not seen it. And when we specifically, given the criticality of it, ask for it to be reviewed by our council, that doesn't happen. I don't care whether it
So your question, Councillor Belford?
Well, the question is, how can we realistically be asked to assess the status of this most important factor going forward if we can't get this kind of basic advice about it?
Through you, Mr. Chair.